Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you all have a great holiday with your families. There are 3 NFL games today. Let's break down some player spotlights within them. So, JJ Zachariason on his late round podcast talked about the Bears' emphasis on getting the ball into DJ Moore's hands more effectively following the firing of their offensive coordinator, which was evident from DJ Moore's shift from a 9.4 average depth of target to a 1.9 the last 2 games. And DJ Moore showcases playmaking skills with this low ADOT, catching all 14 targets during the span for 62 and 106 receiving yards and a touchdown. 13.7 and then 26.9 fantasy points is a great trend. The Lions allowed the 9th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers and the 8th most passing yards per game this season. Last year, DJ Moore against the Lions averaged 6.5 receptions, 82 receiving yards, a touchdown, and 24.7 fantasy points. Go Bears. Jahmyr Gibbs has been great the last 2 weeks for fantasy football with scores of 19.3 and then 24.9. Gibbs has scored 17 plus fantasy points 7 total times this season. In Week 11, Gibbs rushed 11 times for 69 yards and a touchdown, then took 1 catch for 54 yards. In Week 12, Gibbs rushed 21 times for 90 yards, 2 touchdowns, and finished with 3 catches for 9 yards. Last year, Gibbs averaged 51 rushing yards, a touchdown, 4.5 receptions, 37.5 receiving yards, and 19.35 fantasy points against Chicago. I feel indifferent about this Giants versus Cowboys matchup. I'm not sure you can exactly trust anybody completely in this one. Tyrone Tracy on paper has a great matchup against the Dallas Cowboys, allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to running backs and the 2nd most rushing yards per game. Tracy has had some big games, 129 in Week 5, 145 in Week 8, and 103 in Week 10 rushing yards, but he's fumbled in 2 critical moments the last 2 games played, which probably has frustrated the Giants. So while I like Tracy, I wouldn't be shocked if Devin Singletary gets more of a run here. So I think he's worth the risk to an extent, but there is risk. Last time the Giants played the Cowboys, rookie Malik Nabers caught 12 passes for 115 yards, and slot wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson caught 11 balls for 71 yards, major volume and production out of that 1-2 punch. Darius Slayton also caught 3 passes for 56 yards in that game. So while there is risk because we are dealing with backup quarterbacks here, the Giants found ways to be successful against Dallas earlier this season through the air. So for our final game, when it comes to fantasy football, sometimes it's best to just ride the hot hand until the wheels fall off. And the hottest tight end in fantasy football right now is Jonnu Smith, the tight end 1 across the last 2 weeks. In Week 11, Jonnu caught 6 of his 8 targets for 101 yards, 2 touchdowns, and finished with 28.1 fantasy points. Then in Week 12, Smith caught 9 of 11 targets for 87 yards, scored another touchdown, and finished with 23.7 fantasy points. Great volume, great production, receiving yard upside, touchdown upside. It's translated well for Smith for fantasy football. A connection to Tua looks strong right now. Smith will face a Packers defense currently allowing the 10th most fantasy points per game to tight ends this season, which presents a nice opportunity to stay hot. Following the Week 10 bye, Josh Jacobs has been on fire for the Packers. Jacobs rushed 18 times for 76 yards and a touchdown and caught 4 balls for 58 yards in Week 11 for 23.4 fantasy points. Then in Week 12, Jacobs rushed 26 times for 106 yards, 3 touchdowns, and scored 28.6 fantasy points. And Jacobs' hot streak goes beyond the last 2 weeks as he's finished now with over 20 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. The Packers will need to have Jacobs stay hot in a big Miami matchup. Best of luck in your fantasy football matchups this week. Let's catch those W's as we get closer and closer to the fantasy football playoffs.